Alright, I am back with a new video after something of a break. As some of you may know, we recently welcomed a new kid into our family, a daughter, and she's now over a week old, which is very exciting. Also, I had, not going to film any videos for a little bit after that happened, being in the hospital and coming home now, but it's, back to work and stuff, and I wanted to make sure that I was keeping up with the news, and a lot of that is through writing, but certainly still want to keep going with the videos here. I'm back. I thought about doing a Destiny video based on some conversations yesterday, but maybe I'll hold on that. We are in the wake of some pretty significant gaming events for Summer Games Fest or surrounding Summer Games Fest. I don't even know what's like technically classified as Summer Games Fest at this point. Oh, it's also Game Fest, not Games Fest, which I keep writing. I miss E3. Yeah, so we had a big PlayStation 1, and then we had a arguably bigger Xbox One. And, not to get back into the console war space, the console war doesn't even exist anymore. Like, even Xbox is like, yeah, we lost the console war. This is not really a thing anymore. Nintendo's releasing the Switch 2, and, there's just no more real, PlayStation Xbox sales comparison. We'll get into that in a little bit, but I don't know if I call it a conflict. It's morphed into such a strange thing now that, that's sort of what this is about, is whether Microsoft shifting to a far less traditional model rather than just, sell a bunch of consoles, release a bunch of exclusive games, as to whether that is ultimately working out for them. And I've had many positive, many negative opinions on this. I say, the console war thing, it just feels so quaint now of all the different controversies in the real world or that I stumble into in gaming or whatever. It's just it's adorable that you're still doing console war stuff. So yeah, I say positive things about both consoles. I own both consoles. They're in that cabinet back there. Anyway, so the premise of this is Xbox right? Did they do the right thing when it comes to how they've shifted their business away from hardware, kind of significantly away from hardware, and more toward not just Game Pass, but also now this idea that they're just sort of a third-party publisher that also makes hardware, but also is pushing their subscription service with those games. It's a little convoluted, but it seems to be coalescing a little bit. And there's some things that happened over the course of this showcase in terms of games that were shown, in terms of some Game Pass numbers briefly, in terms of price increases and things, and it's sort of gotten clear between this and what's happened with PlayStation over the past year or so, when the strategy has come to fruition, that we can kind of analyze and see how it's going. There are some positive things, certainly, a good amount that suggests that this is sort of working out in a lot of ways, but there are some caveats here that we have to go through as well. As I said, the console war thing is over. It's so over, it's never been more over, as they say. So before this recent, development, PlayStation has been outselling Xbox at least 2-1 for a very long time. This generation, we've just seen every time there's a new financial report, Xbox sales have gone down 30%. Every quarter, it's another 30%. And this all capped off recently as a reaction to tariffs that were subsequently lowered quite a bit. Xbox dramatically increased its prices on all hardware to the point where a normal Series X with extra storage is more than a PS5 Pro. The prices now of Xbox hardware is utterly insane. And we thought that this was going to lead to Sony increasing prices too. That hasn't happened yet. They actually just recently had a sale on hardware. I'm not going to say that that is going to last forever. We still may be in for some price increases, but the whole tariff thing, you can't we have no, it changes day to day. So maybe it was a little premature for Xbox to just jack up the prices wildly like that. That was, I think that happened when there were 140% China tariffs, and now they went down to 40, or I don't even know. It changes so much, who knows? So the point is the hardware thing is over, at least in terms of traditional consoles. One thing that happened this week, the biggest thing probably, is the Xbox handheld. That is, a third-party partnership, and the idea there is that it is it's not the dedicated Xbox handheld device like Xbox handheld. It is still a partner project. It is still going to be pretty pricey, anywhere probably from $600 to $800 by a lot of estimates. But the idea is it's sort of the manifestation of Xbox Anywhere, Game Pass Anywhere, without having to hook up an Xbox controller through Bluetooth for your iPad or your crappy laptop or whatever it is. Like, it is a dedicated device, that's a built-in screen, that's, Switch-like, Steam Deck-like, whatever you want to call it. And it's all their goofy, this is an Xbox, trailers and ad campaign and stuff. This one is okay, this is sort of an Xbox in a lot of ways. And at least right now, that is something that Sony doesn't offer. You can play some Sony games if you're playing on a Steam Deck, if those games are on PC. Because this new thing runs Steam, you can technically play Sony PC games on the Xbox thing. And then we have the Nintendo Switch, which obviously has been a handheld for a long time. So Sony sort of left without a handheld. There are rumors that it is working on one. It obviously did handhelds in the past, but sort of, they were maybe ahead of their time in some ways. But this is, Microsoft has gotten this out first, and they may be working on a better, not better, but more affordable, more mainline one after that. So that is sort of in a time where hardware is just totally sinking for them and just in full disaster mode. This seems like something on the hardware side that is actually promising and feels good. And for someone like me, which I have 2 kids now, I could get a Steam Deck or I could get this Xbox thing, which apparently can play Destiny. So if I have to make a choice there, I think that is going to be what I pick. One interesting thing here is that this was a big negative thing, but it was announced that Outer Worlds 2 was going to cost $80. That seems like stretching it. I like Obsidian. I think they make good games, but it already felt like it was kind of pushing it when Avowed was $70. And now Microsoft, they said they were going to make some games $80. That is starting now. So that did not take very long. I think Microsoft is trying to do just sort of the exact math here, where if first-party games are now $80 across the board, even if it's Outer Worlds 2, even if it's Elder Scrolls 6, God help us, maybe that's 100, but if they're $80 now, it makes flat math, at least in the US, where 3 games that are of, even medium size or above, I guess, will cost as much as a year of Game Pass Ultimate, $240. So it's almost just encouragement to buy Game Pass more than before, because if prices are going up, but at least temporarily Game Pass prices aren't, you can now, if you're planning to buy 3 new games a year, 3 new first-party Xbox games, that instead can just be a Game Pass subscription, and you don't have to worry about these high prices. When this was announced, the most common thing I saw among Xbox fans was who cares? I'm going to play it on Game Pass. We don't know the timeline for how all of these games are released on PlayStation, when they are, but ultimately, by the time these games come to PlayStation, the $80 thing is not exactly going to be, not common. Microsoft and Nintendo may be doing this really early, but we are heading to a place where all big games are going to be here soon enough. I would say outside of, maybe some more independent publishers that are, trying to buck the trend and trying to be more consumer friendly. But I would expect every big, past this year, I think Ghost of Yotei is still $70, but soon enough, it'll be Sony games, it'll be Xbox games, it'll be obviously a lot of big third-party games. And Nintendo started this, so the rationale was just, well, we think Mario Kart's worth $80, take it or leave it. So if you're doing this kind of price on PlayStation, it's not even going to matter. This is also during the situation now where Xbox recently became the biggest publisher of games on PlayStation, which, tell someone that 6-7 years ago and people would laugh you out of the room. It's just a crazy situation that Microsoft is doing all this stuff to bring so many of its games over there. And, one issue is that you don't know what games are coming when. And this idea that if they are coming to PlayStation, is it worth even getting an Xbox? The point is no, it's not worth getting an Xbox. I don't think Microsoft is even really trying to make the case anymore that, we really, really need to sell hardware. We really, really care about this. If they they're barely doing any sort of push for their traditional hardware at this point, and they're jacking up prices $100 on their systems without even batting an eye. So that's not even really a conversation anymore. It's so far gone that you sort of just have to accept that this is the new normal. And we've also gotten to the point where there's so many games heading over to PlayStation, that each new one that's announced, it's like, this is kind of old news at this point. Like, they're going to do this with everything. It's a matter of time. Like, what's going to launch day one on PlayStation? What's not? What are the timelines? Like, that's the confusing part. But the idea that it's like, well, if they're coming to PlayStation, why would you buy an Xbox? You're not going to buy an Xbox probably. Like, Microsoft doesn't care. You don't have to care. Like, you can buy this handheld thing. You can stream on whatever device. And if you really, really want dedicated hardware that's, playing games natively, that's hooked up to your TV, that's a more traditional console experience, like, it exists, but you absolutely don't need it. And this has created kind of an awkward situation for PlayStation where, yeah, they certainly have won the console war and PS5 is selling really well, but the ecosystem of the games on PlayStation now is rather strange. So you have all these Xbox games sort of flooding the zone here. Is that the right football term? I don't know football. In terms of like what's being launched on PlayStation. And PlayStation has these like incredibly lengthy gaps between, it's admittedly very good games, but the development time on these games is just sprawling. We're getting Ghost of Yotei this year, but these major studios, we're talking years and years worth of gaps between these major titles. And then Sony's like, okay, well, clearly we know that's happening. So we'll port these games to PC sometime after launch, 1 year, 3 years, whatever. But okay, in the meantime, we're going to do all these live service stuff. Industry's moving toward live service. So when in between making these games, we can just have ongoing revenue from live service. You know what I'm going to say next, right? It's been a total disaster for Sony here outside of Helldivers. Helldivers is the big exception. Helldivers is great. Helldivers is not an in-house PlayStation game. It is made by Arrowhead, who has made it very clear that their next game is not going to be with PlayStation. So that was sort of a lucky deal that PlayStation made with them. They're not like anti-PlayStation, but like that's the reality, and they're moving on. It's, Arrowhead is not owned by Sony. The things that are owned by Sony are not going so great. We've had all these cancellations internally. The list at this point. Bear Games is probably going to be canceled soon enough. That seems inevitable. Marathon, do I got to go into Marathon? Marathon's not dead. Marathon has suffered severe struggles over the past few months, the last month in particular. So that being a massive hit seems up in the air. The point being is that, what's a good live service that came to PlayStation? Oh, Sea of Thieves, the Xbox game, where it's a very well-established ongoing game at this point. And it's just a very strange situation for Sony where Microsoft's idea of being a publisher for PlayStation is working out, and Microsoft is just absorbing money from PlayStation by being a publisher there. And, that was like, the idea was the main thing was this was going to be for Call of Duty, but now it's like all of these games, and whether that's day and date or whether that's on a delay, you can easily see how that's going to continue for the indefinite future. Call of Duty, it's just automatic. Everyone on PlayStation who plays that series is going to buy the new one, so that's just always shoveling money toward Microsoft, which is one of the big points of that deal in the first place. But there are so few, reverse things like this where Sony even has multi-platform games that are doing this. You have like Destiny 2, which, was mandated to stay multi-platform, and Marathon's going to be multi-platform, but like not the same thing. And Sony is not putting its big first-party games on Xbox, and for many reasons, that seems like a very smart decision. It keeps, there keep being reason to buy a PlayStation because PlayStation has not abandoned the hardware race, and PlayStation does sell a lot of consoles. It's just the whole dynamic of this thing has changed directly and so dramatically to a point where this whole race is sort of unrecognizable. But in a lot of ways, I do think Microsoft is executing its plan better than I would have imagined. However, there are caveats to this where I've said this for a while, but like, what is the cap on Game Pass growth really? If you're in the Xbox ecosystem or own an Xbox, there's a pretty high chance at this point that if you were going to buy Game Pass, you probably would have bought it already. And it's unclear just how much expansion there's going to be outside of gaming. The idea is like, oh, well, you don't need an expensive console. You can stream on your iPad, all you non-gamers. But it's like non-gamers aren't going to suddenly be like core gamers because you can stream a game service on, you know, an iPad or a laptop or whatever. And I think it was announced during this that Game Pass subscriptions went up 1 million, and it's at like 35 million or something there. But growth there has been very, very stagnant. There was a big jump a little while back, but that was just when they converted all the Xbox Gold people over to Game Pass, and Microsoft would never tell me like what is the actual split, like what were actual new Game Pass subscribers and what was the conversion of Gold people to Game Pass. They would never tell me that split, and you know, not just me, anybody. So the growth is, I think, really slowed in Game Pass, and if Game Pass can remain profitable and like Microsoft's gaming division does make money, then maybe that's fine. But if you're so heavily relying on Game Pass as like the future of your entire brand, and you can't break past a certain ceiling, even with not even that much competition, like we can talk about all the streaming services competing against each other: Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, Max, HBO Max, whatever it's called now. But this isn't really present in this space. I mean, there's subscription services in terms of like, oh, well, Sony will give you these free games. I don't know, what does Nintendo Online get you? Like, not game. I don't think Nintendo Online lets you play Mario Kart Online, but there's, you know, EA Play and Ubisoft Plus, but like there's no real equivalent to Game Pass. But even despite that, like they can't really, you know, the market of rapid expansion that we saw, I think it was mostly during COVID, is sort of really slowing to the point where it's like, where do you even pull these new people? So that's kind of tough. The other issue is like, yes, all of these games are going over to PlayStation and, you know, they can expand their footprint there, but I still think there's a quality issue, or at least maybe not a quality issue, but at least a relevance issue. I think you kind of know what I mean, where, you know, Microsoft bought all these first party publishers and the idea was like, oh, we're going to have this giant collection of amazing first party games. And like, there have been some quality hiccups, but then even things that are like pretty good have still not exactly broken out. And, you know, the highest profile examples of these a couple of years ago was Redfall. You know, that was a very kind of key live-ish service game from Arcane. Easily one of the worst AAA games I've ever played. And, you know, that was an utter disaster. But even now, you can have games that are like, okay, you know, games that I personally like. I like Avowed and Starfield more than most people. South of Midnight came out recently, and that was well received. But again, in terms of like relevance, in terms of this is not, you know, Sony putting God of War on Xbox or Sony putting The Last of Us on Xbox. Avowed is sort of a game that came out and was never really spoken of again in terms of whether it was success or failure. If you don't hear that it's a big success, it probably underperformed. South of Midnight, that was a great game. It's just not a very wide-reaching game, something like that. Not all of these are on PlayStation, obviously, but I'm just talking about like the first-party output. Starfield, could do a whole segment on Starfield, but obviously that is sort of one of Bethesda's worst received games when all is said and done, you know, outside of like launch Fallout 76. But Fallout 76 is now more relevant than Starfield somehow. So, and then, you know, the promise of future quality, I'm just not super confident in that either, because looking ahead, it's like, okay, we have Fable, we have Perfect Dark. Are those going to be actually good games, or are we just excited that the IP is coming back? And then the other games, you know, where's Halo? Does Microsoft ever making another Halo? Like they say they are, but if they're not even talking about it, you know, when is this getting pushed to? 27, 28, 30? Who knows? And then obviously I just wrote about Elder Scrolls 6. This is the 7th anniversary of the announcement of Elder Scrolls 6. Nuts. And like, sure, Elder Scrolls 6 will be a big game and will probably be good. And it has been in development for almost a decade now. And it's, you know, we're going to be pushing 2030 probably by the time it gets here. So it's not quite equivalent of, you know, I would say Sony or Nintendo putting all their games on another platform. I just don't think Xbox has that level of first party quality yet. I think it's improved, but I don't think it's at the same level despite all these purchases. You know, you can have kind of a sales cheat code because you bought the Call of Duty developer, but that's not really the same thing. And, you know, what's happening now is they're porting all these games over to PlayStation, but a lot of it's like back catalog. And you're probably going to start running out of games that people really care about being ported over eventually. You you know, oh, Halo, the Master Chief Collection or whatever is going to move over, or did they already do old Gears games? I don't know. But eventually you're going to run out of back catalog stuff, and then it's going to kind of solely rely on newer games. And then are you going to stay as the super big publisher on PlayStation? Like, I don't know. There's also still just like a lot of uncertainty as to the cross-platform stuff, like what's coming out on Xbox, when's it going to PlayStation, is it not going to PlayStation, like are there still true exclusives? Like it's kind of all over the place, and they have not picked a set, you know, plan for that, nor do we really have any way to judge what the idea is there. Some games are just not announced as coming to PlayStation, even though it seems like logically maybe they will be at some point, like Avowed and Starfield. Starfield in particular seems like hell, you know, go and release it on PlayStation. Why not? But that hasn't happened yet either. So it's a little bit of a jumble there. I do think this Microsoft strategy makes more sense than it used to, or at least it appears to. I think everyone just had to sort of come to terms that like the hardware thing, the traditional console boxes, you know, they're kind of tapping out there, at least for this generation. I know they are making next generation hardware, but you know, it remains to be seen if that will make an impact. If, you know, it's been 2 generations of underperforming hardware now, and even if something like the handheld is cool, super high price, you know, is that going to be a widespread, you know, use case for people who either, you know, already own an Xbox, don't own one? Like, what is actually going to be the end result of that? But if you just view it as a publishing strategy, as a reliance on a subscription service that doesn't really have an equal right now, you can see how this was sort of out of a bunch of bad options. Maybe this was the best option, and maybe this is working out okay. It's still early days, but I just thought this was worth circling back to and sort of reanalyzing at present based on the recent showcases and stuff. So I could talk about individual games maybe a different time, though it's perhaps getting a little late for that. But so yeah. So anyway, I will be back to videos as much as I can. No promises on schedule, but I'll do my best. So anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.